The sterile white walls of the Galactic Assembly's conference room reflected the soft hum of diplomatic murmurs. Hiroshi Tanaka stood at the back of the room, a silent observer, as the Earth envoy discussed peace terms with the Radiant Empire. His eyes were fixed on the diplomats, listening intently as the fate of the galaxy seemed to hang in the balance. He appeared calm, even detached, but his mind was elsewhere, sharp and alert. For years, Hiroshi had balanced the roles of diplomat and covert operative, skills honed by his past as a ninja. His calm demeanor, the silent way he moved, was often mistaken for passive observation. But inside, his senses were tuned to the slightest change in the air, the faintest shift in the atmosphere. That's how he noticed the subtle flicker of movement outside the window. The moment was almost imperceptible, just a blur against the blackness of space. It wasn't normal. Hiroshi's instincts flared. Without a word, he moved. He knew what it meant before anyone else did. A shuttle had broken through the defense perimeter of the station. His thoughts raced as he slipped out of the room without anyone noticing. The hallway was empty, and Hiroshi's mind sharpened, adrenaline pumping as he activated his communicator. The calm voice of his superior crackled in his earpiece. "Hiroshi, it's happening. They're here." "Understood," Hiroshi replied in a whisper, even though there was no one around to hear. His fingers worked fast, tapping his wristband to access the station's security feeds. There, on the monitor, he saw them, the Galactic slavers. Clad in dark, sleek armor, they moved quickly, their black ships docking with the station. The low hum of their engines sent a chill down his spine. These slavers were known for two things: greed and brutality. But there was something even more dangerous about this group. They had captured a high-profile diplomat earlier in the mission. That diplomat was Hiroshi's colleague, and their capture was no accident. The slavers were here for something much bigger than ransom. "Hiroshi, the diplomat is on the Eclipser." The voice of command echoed through his ear. "They've already moved him." Hiroshi's pulse quickened. He had one job: protect Earth's interests at all costs. He wasn't just a diplomat. He was Earth's last line of defense in this vast galaxy. And now, he had to do what he was trained for. The sound of his footsteps was muffled as he sprinted through the narrow corridors. His ninja training kicked in, allowing him to slip past the few crew members who were still on high alert, unnoticeable like a shadow in the night. His mind raced as he recalled the layout of the station, calculating his path to the airlocks where the slavers' shuttle was most likely waiting. But he didn't have much time. A door slid open ahead, and Hiroshi froze, slipping into a dark alcove. The slavers had arrived. He saw them, their red visors glowing ominously in the dim lights as they moved quickly through the corridor. One of them, an enormous brute with pale, mottled skin, barked orders in an alien tongue. Hiroshi could barely hear him over the adrenaline pounding in his ears. He didn't wait. With practiced precision, he launched himself forward, a blur in the dim hallway, as swift and quiet as a shadow. One slaver dropped to the floor, silently incapacitated with a swift strike to the neck. The second one didn't even know what hit him. Hiroshi was already gone, like smoke disappearing into the air. The rest of the slavers were more careful, more wary. They knew Earth's diplomats were no easy prey. Hiroshi's next encounter was harder. He was forced into a direct confrontation with another slaver, smaller but quicker. The slaver drew a plasma blade, slashing through the air with deadly intent. Hiroshi blocked the attack with a well-timed parry, using the slaver's momentum against him. In a fluid motion, Hiroshi twisted the blade from the alien's hand, then slammed him into the wall with a calculated force. As the slaver slumped to the ground, Hiroshi continued his sprint, feeling the faint echo of his heartbeats against the cold steel of the station. The communicator buzzed again. "Status?" Hiroshi's superior's voice was tight with urgency. "I'm on the move," Hiroshi responded, his voice low and controlled. "The diplomat is still alive. I need a diversion to reach the shuttle. You have 20 minutes. After that, we're pulling out." Hiroshi didn't respond. He didn't need to. The deadline was already etched in his mind. He could feel it, ticking down with every second. If the slavers had already moved the Diplomat, there was no time to waste. By the time Hiroshi reached the shuttle bay, the tension in the air was palpable. The low murmur of engines reverberated through the walls, growing louder as he approached. He crouched behind a large crate and peered around the corner, spotting the Eclipser. The slaver's ship loomed ominously in the distance, its sleek black hull reflecting the pale starlight. Hiroshi's breath was steady as he scanned the surroundings. There were guards everywhere. This wouldn't be easy. Through the faint static of his comm, his superior's voice cut in once more. Hiroshi, if you fail, the peace talks are over. The Diplomat holds the key to an alliance with the Radiant Empire. If they use him against us. I know. Hiroshi cut in, already moving. He had heard the stakes, and he understood the weight of the situation. This wasn't just about one diplomat. This was about the future of Earth's place in the galaxy. There was no room for failure. With a final, calculated breath, Hiroshi moved into action. He darted from cover, silently slipping through shadows, his eyes fixed on the group of slavers guarding the docking bay. He couldn't afford to be seen. Not now. His mission was clear: infiltrate, incapacitate, and rescue. The galaxy had underestimated humanity. Hiroshi was about to show them why that was a fatal mistake. The cold metal of the Eclipser's hull hummed against Hiroshi's palm as he crouched behind a row of crates, surveying the chaos unfolding before him. The docking bay was a flurry of activity, the slaver guards moving in and out, their heavy boots echoing against the hard surface of the floor. His eyes narrowed. The Eclipser was a fortress disguised as a ship, its vast corridors and concealed compartments offering the perfect setting for those who thrived on secrecy and danger. Hiroshi had no time to waste. His breathing slowed, controlled, as his mind worked in perfect sync with his body. Every movement was calculated, a step in a dance that had been rehearsed countless times, but never quite like this. He was on enemy turf now, surrounded by people who had no qualms about killing. And the diplomat he needed to rescue was locked somewhere inside the belly of this ship, far from reach, surrounded by danger. Hiroshi, report. His superior's voice crackled through his earpiece, sharp and demanding. I'm inside, Hiroshi whispered, his voice barely audible even to himself. He scanned the room again. The slavers were too distracted by the logistics of securing the diplomat, not yet aware of the silent threat that had slipped into their ranks. The security is tighter than I anticipated. I'll need a diversion to get to the lower levels. A pause followed before the voice returned. You have 5 minutes. After that, we'll cut the signal. Understood, Hiroshi replied. The clock was ticking. If he didn't move fast, it wouldn't just be the diplomat's life that was at risk. With the precision of a predator closing in on its prey, Hiroshi slid into the shadows. He knew the layout of the Eclipser. Its architecture was labyrinthine, designed to disorient and trap the unaware. Every hallway seemed to lead to another, every room to another danger. Hiroshi's senses were tuned, his mind working like a high-powered machine, analyzing every sound, every movement. His eyes fixed on the access terminal just a few meters away, guarded by 2 slavers who were too busy arguing to notice him. Stupid Kthal, one of the guards muttered under his breath. Thinks we can just walk in and out without a hitch. This will be the last time we do business with him. Hiroshi couldn't afford to wait for their conversation to end. In one fluid motion, he crossed the distance between him and the guards. His hands moved quickly, almost too fast to follow. The first guard was silenced by a swift jab to the pressure point in his neck. The second guard, momentarily caught off guard, was disarmed with a quick spin, the plasma pistol now in Hiroshi's grip. In a matter of seconds both were on the ground unconscious, their bodies limp against the cold floor. The terminal was now unguarded, and Hiroshi wasted no time. He quickly accessed the system, his fingers flying over the holographic interface, bypassing security protocols with practiced ease. The ship's layout scrolled across the screen, revealing the location of the diplomat. He was held in the lower levels, far too deep for a simple rescue. He exhaled slowly. This is going to get worse before it gets better. A brief glance at the time on his wrist indicated he had 2 minutes before the diversion would be activated. Hiroshi knew exactly what he needed to do. His plan was risky. No, it was dangerous. But it was the only shot he had. He triggered the ship's emergency alarm system. The red lights flashed immediately, and a blaring siren echoed throughout the Eclipser. Chaos erupted in the docking bay as the guards scrambled to their posts. Hiroshi could already hear the footsteps pounding toward him, but he was already in motion. He moved through the labyrinth of the ship's interior, using the confusion as cover for his advance. Each step was a silent stride forward, each corner a potential deadly encounter avoided. The hallway ahead curved into darkness. Hiroshi reached into his belt, pulling out a small device. With a flick of his wrist, a silken rope shot from the device, attaching itself to a ledge above. With no hesitation, he began to ascend, his body moving fluidly up the wall, almost defying gravity. His climb was smooth, calculated, each movement leading him higher toward his goal. He reached the upper level in a matter of seconds, his grip tight on the ledge as he swung himself over the edge. A soft thud marked his landing, and he quickly moved into the shadows. From here, he could hear the slavers below him, hustling, shouting orders to one another. The commotion was to his advantage. Hiroshi's training had prepared him for moments like this, when time was the most precious commodity. The Diplomat was just beyond the next door, Hiroshi's primary target. But there was another obstacle, a group of guards stationed in front of the holding cell. They were talking in low voices, unaware of the imminent danger just a few feet away. Hiroshi didn't hesitate. He moved again, a blur in the dark, silent and lethal. The first guard fell without a sound, his throat crushed by Hiroshi's hand. The second guard, slightly quicker, turned just in time to raise his weapon. But Hiroshi was faster. He ducked under the beam of plasma fire, spun low to the ground, and knocked the guard out with a swift strike to the jaw. The third guard, realizing too late that his comrades were incapacitated, tried to reach for his communicator. But before he could make a sound, Hiroshi's blade was at his throat, the tip just grazing the skin. "Don't scream," Hiroshi murmured, his voice like ice. "You won't make it out alive if you do." The guard nodded, fear evident in his eyes. Hiroshi allowed him to retreat, his presence nothing more than a shadow that would soon be forgotten. Hiroshi didn't need to kill them all, he needed to get in, retrieve the Diplomat, and get out. He stood still for a moment, listening for any signs of movement. The door to the Diplomat's cell loomed ahead, secured with a complex biometric lock. Hiroshi's fingers moved across the panel, a series of quick motions that opened the door silently. Inside, the Diplomat lay unconscious, bound and restrained. Hiroshi moved swiftly, cutting the restraints with a quick slash from his blade. He didn't waste time on niceties. The Diplomat was alive barely, but alive. The faint sound of footsteps echoed from behind. Hiroshi's eyes narrowed. The next wave of guards was coming. His only choice was to move fast. He hauled the Diplomat over his shoulder, ready to make his escape. "Stay with me," Hiroshi whispered into the Diplomat's ear, though the man was too unconscious to respond. "We're getting you out." With a deep breath, Hiroshi moved toward the exit, every step a silent calculation, every heartbeat a reminder of the clock ticking down. Hiroshi moved quickly through the narrow corridors of the Eclipser, his mind sharply focused on the task at hand. The Diplomat, barely conscious, clung to his back, his limp form a constant reminder of the stakes. Every moment spent moving through the maze-like ship was another moment closer to their capture, but Hiroshi's steps were measured, calculated, like a man who had already planned every move, every contingency. There was no room for mistakes. The halls were eerily quiet now, save for the occasional hum of the ship's machinery. The loud sirens and chaos of the earlier alarm had subsided, but that only meant the slavers were regrouping. Hiroshi knew they wouldn't be fooled for long. The slaver commander, Orvok Thal, was no fool. Hiroshi could almost feel the man's calculating gaze, watching him from the shadows, anticipating his every move. He pressed on, deeper into the ship, moving through the low-lit hallways with the ease of a predator in its own domain. The diplomat's breathing was slow, labored, and Hiroshi had to fight the urge to check on him. He couldn't afford any distractions. Not now. As he turned a corner, he saw them, the slaver guards. 3 of them, standing in the middle of the hall, blocking the way forward. They were talking amongst themselves, their voices low and harsh, but Hiroshi heard one word that made his heart tighten. Kthal. The name of the commander. Orvok was near. His instincts screamed at him to take action, but the diplomat's unconscious form was a liability. Hiroshi needed to think quickly. The corridor ahead led into a larger room, likely a storage bay, but it was a dead end. If he kept going that way, he would be trapped. The slavers would surround him, and the mission would be over. He glanced to the side, where a maintenance hatch lay partially open. The tight space offered a perfect escape route. Hiroshi hesitated for a split second before moving. He darted to the side, slipping through the gap in the door with the grace of a shadow, his body barely making a sound as he squeezed into the narrow passage. Inside, the air was cold, metallic. It was a utility tunnel, a place most people never ventured into. Hiroshi's body pressed against the walls as he carefully moved forward, making sure every movement was calculated. The diplomat's weight shifted slightly on his back, but Hiroshi barely felt it. His focus was razor sharp. He didn't know how much time had passed before he emerged from the tunnel, but the sense of urgency was growing. The sounds of the slavers moving above and around him were too close for comfort. Hiroshi's every step was now careful, deliberate. He was getting close to the detention block, the place where the diplomat was held. He could almost feel the tension in the air, the walls themselves seeming to press down on him as though the ship knew what he was planning. Suddenly, a voice echoed down the hallway. "Move out! Kthal wants him alive!" The words sent a chill down Hiroshi's spine. The slavers were closing in, and there was no more time to waste. He glanced at the diplomat one more time. His pulse quickened. The man's life depended on Hiroshi now. The stakes had never been higher. The large door to the detention block was just ahead, but it was guarded. 2 slavers stood at attention, weapons drawn. Hiroshi paused for a moment, hidden in the shadows. The dim lights flickered above, casting long, ominous shadows across the walls. He needed to make this quick. In one smooth motion, he threw a small device across the hallway, watching as it clattered to the ground. The slavers turned, their attention momentarily diverted. The brief distraction was all Hiroshi needed. He moved forward with the speed of a striking cobra, his blade already in hand. The first guard didn't have time to react. Hiroshi was on him in a flash, knocking the weapon from his hand and sending him sprawling to the floor with a precise blow to the chest. The second guard raised his weapon, but Hiroshi was already behind him, twisting the man's arm and forcing him to the ground. He didn't kill them. That wasn't the mission. He was here to get the diplomat out alive. With the guards incapacitated, Hiroshi reached for the security panel beside the door. His fingers moved with practiced speed, overriding the locking system. As the door slid open, he stepped into the dimly lit room. The sight of the diplomat, bound and unconscious, filled him with a sense of urgency. Hiroshi moved quickly, kneeling beside him. "Wake up," he murmured softly, his voice urgent but gentle. There was no response. The diplomat's breathing was shallow. Hiroshi checked his pulse, steady, but weak. He hadn't been here long, but the slavers had likely kept him drugged to keep him docile. It was a standard tactic. As Hiroshi worked to unbind the diplomat, a sudden sound broke his concentration. Footsteps. He froze, every muscle in his body going rigid. Someone was coming. The door to the detention block slid open, and Hiroshi spun around. Standing in the doorway was Orvok Kthal himself, tall and imposing. His reptilian eyes gleamed in the low light, a cruel smirk stretching across his face. "Did you really think you could just walk in here and take what's mine?" Orvok's voice was low, venomous. Hiroshi's hand instinctively went to his blade, but he kept it hidden. No need to reveal his position just yet. He had to think. One mistake, and they would both be dead. I don't have time for games, Kthal, Hiroshi said, his voice steady, despite the pounding in his chest. Your ship is a prison, but you've made the mistake of thinking you can keep me here. Orvok's smirk deepened, his claws scraping the floor as he took a step forward. You've underestimated me, human, he sneered. This ship is my domain. You're nothing more than a stray dog in a wolf's den. Then let's see how well your den holds up against me, Hiroshi replied, his voice cold as ice. The tension in the air was palpable. There was no turning back now. Orvok's hand went to his belt, and Hiroshi moved without hesitation, drawing his blade in a fluid, practiced motion. In that moment, everything went silent. The air, thick with anticipation, seemed to hold its breath as both men faced off, two predators in the dark. Hiroshi's blade gleamed under the dim light of the detention block. He held his stance, muscles coiled like a spring, ready for anything. Orvok Kthal, towering before him, seemed unbothered, a cruel smile curling on his alien lips. His reptilian eyes glinted with malice as he slowly drew a weapon of his own, a long, serrated blade glowing with a faint, lethal hum. You think you can challenge me, human? Orvok's voice was deep, filled with amusement. You are alone, outmatched, and running out of time. Hiroshi's grip on his katana tightened. You're mistaken. I've already won. The words lingered in the air for a split second, thick with tension, before Orvok lunged forward. His speed was shocking for someone of his size, his blade aimed straight for Hiroshi's chest. Hiroshi sidestepped the strike, his body flowing effortlessly with the motion. Orvok's attack missed, but he quickly recovered, spinning around to deliver a sweeping slash. Hiroshi's instincts kicked in. He parried the blow with his katana, the clash of metal ringing in the quiet room. He shifted his weight, using Orvok's momentum to redirect his attack. With a swift kick to the side, Hiroshi sent Orvok stumbling back. The slaver commander's eyes narrowed in fury, but Hiroshi was already moving again, his blade cutting through the air in a series of calculated strikes. They moved like shadows in the dim light, Orvok's ferocity clashing against Hiroshi's fluid precision. The two danced, a deadly ballet, each strike a test of skill, speed, and strength. Hiroshi's mind remained sharp, analyzing every movement, anticipating each of Orvok's attacks before they came. He had been trained for moments like this. He was a shinobi, a master of both the mind and the body. But Orvok was no ordinary opponent. His strength was terrifying, his endurance almost unmatched. Hiroshi could see it now, the difference in their sheer physical power. Orvok wasn't just a warrior, he was a force of nature. Yet, Hiroshi's agility and finesse gave him an edge. The slaver commander's attacks were wild, born out of anger, while Hiroshi's were deliberate, measured. Every move, every counter, was part of a greater plan. Orvok swung again, this time with a brutal overhead strike. Hiroshi barely managed to deflect it, the force of the blows sending a shock through his arms. His footing slipped on the smooth floor, and for a moment, it seemed like Orvok would land the killing blow. But Hiroshi's instincts took over. With a burst of speed, he rolled backward, narrowly avoiding the strike. As he came back to his feet, he aimed for Orvok's exposed side, but the slaver was quick to recover, raising his blade in time to block. Impressive, Orvok said, breathing heavily. But it won't be enough. Hiroshi's eyes never left his opponent. We'll see. There was no time for further words. As they squared off again, the door to the detention block opened with a hiss. Hiroshi's senses flared. More slaver guards were coming. The sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway. There was no more room for hesitation. Hiroshi had to finish this quickly. With a sudden movement, Hiroshi feinted to the left, baiting Orvok into swinging at his blind side. Orvok took the bait, his massive arm cutting through the air in a wide arc. Hiroshi ducked, rolling under the attack, and with a swift motion, he disarmed the slaver commander. Orvok's blade clattered to the floor, just inches from his feet. Hiroshi's katana hovered inches from Orvok's throat. For a brief moment, there was silence, the tension hanging in the air like a knife's edge. The slaver commander's eyes flickered, a brief flash of uncertainty crossing his features. Hiroshi stood over him, his breathing steady, his posture unwavering. "You've lost," Hiroshi said, his voice cold and unwavering. "You're finished." Orvok's mouth twisted into a grin, though his eyes betrayed his defeat. "You think this is over? You have no idea what you're up against." Before Hiroshi could respond, the sound of hurried footsteps interrupted them. A group of slaver guards had entered the room, weapons drawn. They had been waiting for the right moment to strike. Hiroshi's mind raced. He didn't have time to waste. He didn't hesitate. Hiroshi lowered his blade, making sure Orvok was incapacitated but alive. He had a much bigger objective now, getting the diplomat to safety. "Stay down," Hiroshi ordered as he turned to the diplomat, who was beginning to stir. "We're leaving." The diplomat groaned, slowly regaining consciousness. His eyes flickered open, confusion clouding his features. Where am I?" "You're safe now," Hiroshi said, his tone soft but urgent. "Stay with me. I'll get you out of here." But their escape wasn't going to be easy. As Hiroshi lifted the diplomat and began to move toward the exit, the sound of more guards filling the hallways grew louder. The slavers had already started to organize, and their numbers were increasing. Hiroshi's pulse quickened. He had to think fast. He sprinted toward the back of the detention block, pulling the diplomat with him. The layout of the ship flashed through his mind. There had to be a way out, some secret escape route. The main doors were too risky, and the halls would be crawling with guards. Hiroshi needed an alternative. His eyes scanned the walls, the tight, claustrophobic space offering no immediate solutions. Then he saw it, an emergency escape hatch, barely visible in the corner. Hiroshi's heart raced. It was their only shot. He moved quickly, prying the hatch open with one hand while keeping the diplomat steady with the other. The hatch squealed as it slid open, revealing a narrow, dimly lit tunnel. Hiroshi didn't hesitate. He shoved the diplomat through first, then followed, closing the hatch behind them. They were in the dark now, crawling through the tunnel at a hurried pace. Hiroshi's mind raced, calculating the quickest route to the ship's exterior. He could hear the distant sounds of slaver guards searching above them, but they were hidden for now. "We're almost there," Hiroshi murmured, though doubt gnawed at the edges of his mind. It wasn't over yet. As they crawled through the narrow passage, Hiroshi felt the weight of the diplomat's life pressing down on him. This mission had already cost him so much time, energy, and now, his trust in his own ability to succeed. But as he reached the end of the tunnel and the small airlock door loomed ahead, Hiroshi knew there was no turning back. They were almost free. The airlock door was close. Hiroshi's mind raced as he pulled the diplomat through the narrow passage, his fingers aching with the strain of holding on. Every step forward felt like it might be their last. The sound of distant footsteps echoed through the tight, claustrophobic tunnel behind them, guards closing in. Hiroshi kept moving, his focus unshaken, but his heart pounded in his chest. He had to get them to the escape pods, and fast. The longer they stayed here, the greater the chance they'd be caught. He could feel the urgency building in every cell of his body. The diplomat, barely conscious, stumbled along beside him, his breath shallow but steady. Hiroshi could feel the man's weight against him, a constant reminder of how much was at stake. The future of Earth's alliance with the Radiant Empire hung in the balance. If they didn't make it out, everything they had worked for would be lost. And Hiroshi couldn't let that happen. Not after everything they had endured. "Stay with me," Hiroshi whispered urgently, glancing over his shoulder. "Just a little further." The diplomat didn't respond, but Hiroshi could feel his faint nod. He was still alive, still holding on. The tunnel led to a small chamber, and Hiroshi paused for a moment to check their position. The blaring alarms of the ship's security system were louder now, a constant reminder of the danger closing in. They had no time left. He turned to the diplomat and spoke again, his voice low but firm. "Get to the pod. Now." The diplomat, despite his dazed state, nodded weakly and began moving toward the small, dimly lit escape pod that sat just ahead. The hatch was already open, waiting for them. Hiroshi's hands moved quickly, pulling the Diplomat toward the pod. But as he reached for the control panel, he froze. A new sound reached his ears, the unmistakable hum of powered-up weaponry. Turning sharply, Hiroshi's eyes narrowed. There, in the doorway of the chamber, stood a tall, menacing figure. Orvok Thal. The slaver commander had followed them. Hiroshi could feel the tension rise instantly. He had been prepared for this, but the reality of facing Orvok once again was far more chilling. The slaver was standing between them and the escape pod. The doors were closing, the escape their only chance. "You think you can run, human?" Orvok's voice boomed, deep and full of venom. He was calm, but Hiroshi could see the anger simmering just beneath the surface. "You have nowhere to go." Hiroshi's hand tightened on the hilt of his katana, the blade humming softly in the quiet room. The ship's alarms continued to wail in the background, but Hiroshi's focus was on Orvok alone. He knew what this meant, the final confrontation. It was him, or the slaver commander. Only one would make it out alive. "This ends now, Kthal," Hiroshi said, his voice steady despite the tension crackling in the air. Orvok chuckled darkly, his claws clicking against the floor as he took a slow step forward. "You're a fool to think you can defeat me. I am the leader of the most powerful force in the galaxy." "We'll see," Hiroshi muttered, shifting his weight. He wasn't backing down now. Not when they were so close. Orvok lunged first. His massive frame surged forward with terrifying speed, his weapon slicing through the air toward Hiroshi's throat. But Hiroshi was ready. With a swift move, he sidestepped the attack, feeling the air rush past him as the blade missed by mere inches. Hiroshi didn't hesitate. In one fluid motion, he struck, his katana flashing through the dim light as it cut toward Orvok's side. Orvok growled in pain, the strike landing but not deep enough to incapacitate him. He swung his weapon back at Hiroshi in a brutal arc, the force of the blows sending a shock through Hiroshi's arms as he barely blocked it. Hiroshi gritted his teeth, knowing that he couldn't keep this up forever. The slaver's strength was overwhelming, his attacks relentless. Hiroshi's speed, his agility, and his training were the only things keeping him alive. But even he couldn't deny the truth. Orvok was more powerful than him. A single hit could end this fight. And then it hit him, the only way to survive. He had to outsmart him. Hiroshi took a step back, making a show of retreating. Orvok, eager to end this, took the bait. He charged forward, a final, powerful strike aimed directly at Hiroshi's chest. But Hiroshi was already moving. As Orvok's blade came crashing down, Hiroshi ducked under the attack, rolling to the side. At the same time, he kicked a small piece of debris across the floor, sending it clattering to the far side of the room. Orvok's eyes flickered briefly in the direction of the sound, just long enough for Hiroshi to make his move. With a burst of speed, Hiroshi lunged forward, driving his katana into Orvok's exposed side. The slaver commander howled in pain, stumbling back, his weapon dropping from his hands. For a moment, Orvok faltered, his strength faltering as Hiroshi twisted the blade deeper. But then, with a roar, Orvok swung his arm around, knocking Hiroshi aside with a powerful blow. Hiroshi crashed into the wall, the impact rattling his bones. For a moment, everything went black. Hiroshi shook his head, clearing the stars from his vision. He had to stay conscious. He had to finish this. The pod was almost within reach, and they couldn't afford to waste another second. He pushed himself to his feet, barely able to focus. Orvok, still reeling from the strike, staggered toward him, his eyes burning with rage. "You think you can defeat me?" Orvok hissed, his voice thick with pain. "You're nothing but a pest." But Hiroshi was done talking. He had one shot at this. With everything he had left, Hiroshi rushed forward, not giving Orvok a chance to react. His blade flashed in the dim light, striking with precision as he aimed for Orvok's throat. This time, there was no hesitation, no mercy. The slaver commander crumpled to the floor with a final, gurgling gasp. Hiroshi stood over him, chest heaving, his body battered and bruised, but alive. It was over. The diplomat, still weak, was barely conscious, but Hiroshi didn't stop to check. He turned, pulling the man with him as he staggered toward the escape pod. The doors hissed shut behind them, sealing them in. They were free.